The 1981 Oscar-winning film Chariots of Fire told the story of Scottish runner Eric Liddell and his victory in the 400-meter men's race at the 1924 Summer Olympics in Paris, and the story of his devout faith and refusal to run on Sunday, costing him a chance to compete in his best event, the 100-meter race. This rare display of integrity and personal sacrifice by a great champion continues to inspire many. After the Olympics, Eric Liddell ran a much greater race, true to his spirit and strength. In 1925, he sailed to serve in China as a missionary until his death in a Japanese prison camp in 1943. On this day of discovery, the three daughters of Eric Liddell returned to China for the first time since being sent to safety in 1941 to discover God's faithfulness to a faithful runner.
In 1941, the Japanese armies tightened their grip on North China as war raged in Europe. Missionary Eric Liddell and his colleagues had been forced to leave their post in rural Shaojiang and seek safety in the city of Tientsin. Even there, life was growing increasingly uncertain for everyone. Eric was deeply concerned for his wife Florence, his daughters 6-year-old Patricia and 4-year-old Heather, and there was a baby on the way.
It was getting so uncertain in China. And she had 2 small children, expecting a third. And I know Mother said to me she was afraid, he was afraid that maybe we would be kidnapped or taken hostage, and then he would have to do things that he didn't want to do. And he could do his work better if he knew that we were safe in Canada and we would wait. The last time I saw my father was we were sailing back to Canada on the Nita Maru, which was a Japanese ship. And my father insisted that we travel on a Japanese ship, that we would be the safest, and he was right. And we sailed to San Francisco. And I remember it was a lovely, sunny day, and he took us down to, we inspected the whole ship, and then we went down to the cabin. And my mother was about 6 months pregnant with Maureen, and she wasn't feeling particularly well. So he sat Heather and I down beside Mom, and he said to me, I remember my part particularly because that was me. And he said, Patricia, I want you to look after your mother, and I want you to look after Heather, and help with this new baby that's coming. And I want you to do this and promise me until I return. And so, of course, I said, of course I will. And we all expected 2 years he would be back. And Heather said, okay, that's enough of that. Let's go explore the ship, because she is this wonderful free spirit. But of course, she was small too. And those words really stayed with me.
In May 2008, Day of Discovery invited Eric Liddell's 3 daughters to travel with them to China. For Patricia, Heather, and Maureen, this was their first return to China since their father sent them home with their mother to the safety of Canada in 1941. They settled in Toronto, and for nearly 4 years waited expectantly for their father's return, a return which never came. Eric Liddell's death in a Japanese internment camp at Weishen, just 6 months before its liberation, broke their hearts and left a hole in their lives that was never filled. On this journey back to China, the daughters of Eric Liddell would walk in their father's steps and discover a place their mother often spoke of across the lonely years. A place that would one day fill the emptiness in their hearts. A place where the family finally all came together. A place Florence Liddell described to her daughters as our magic circle.
Look at this, dinner in honor of the Liddell family. Oh, this is so nice. Special. Onward.
These three are the Liddell family.
Where do we go?
She's the maid.
She does our
When was the last time you saw Eric Liddell?
I think sometime in early 41, I think. He was very busy, going back and forth between Tianjin and Xiaochang. He had a hard job. He had to separate from his family sometimes, or most of the time. And he had a hard time. But he really is a very dedicated teacher. You know, he loves the students, and he loves to spread the gospel to students. He has the students full respect.
Li Ai, as he's known in China, is not an unfamiliar name, not just because of Chariots of Fire and what that brought, but the fact that he stayed on in China and served the people of China during a time when they were under oppression. The Japanese attack was so severe, and he cared for wounded. He risked his own life. Here was a Scotsman who was prepared to die to save the life of a Chinese farmer. That kind of practical expression of love touches people's hearts around the world, and in China, he is highly respected today.
What are you looking forward to on this trip to China?
I maybe want too much from this trip because for me it feels like I'm completing some kind of circle. And because my father always seemed to belong to everybody else in the world, but not to me, I'm hoping to capture something of his essence here to take home with me and to heal a little spot I have in my heart.
I think what I'm really looking forward to is Weishen. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it, but it's something that I've wanted to do. As a child, we thought about exactly where my father was, and we used to think in the morning, it's nighttime for him, and the opposite way around. And when we'd say our prayers at night, we knew he'd be saying his prayers in the morning. And so now it'd be good just to be in that place. I know it won't be exactly the same, but It will be different, but it'll be the place. There's a great healing process going on. And I didn't realize how much pain that we children, and my mother must have had far more, had buried deep inside of us. You say, well, I'm going to be strong, and you go on and you try and forget. And when I first read some of the books, I could not, let's say, have you read the book yet? And because I wept and wept, and it's been a cleansing, a healing. And somehow I think, I think my mother and father would be just delighted. I can almost feel them smiling down and saying, good, good. Especially for Maureen. Mom would be just so pleased, so pleased. I'm sort of the old hand.
Because Maureen was sort of left out in the whole thing.
She was.
Tell me.
She was left out because when we were in Toronto, you see, that's when she was born. So she said, I haven't even been in China. But we explained very carefully to her that she was actually in China, but it was like she was in a taxi with the curtains drawn, because we used to have curtains. And she was quite happy with that when she was 3 and 4. But she was always looking for her father, always.
This is the site of the former Mackenzie Memorial Hospital in Tianjin, where Patricia and Heather were born. And Eric Liddell would have lived at the time, before he was married. The homes of the London Missionary Society were just on the other side of this building. Well, this area is directly behind the Mackenzie Memorial Hospital, and most likely this was where the homes of the London Missionary Society were. And of course, it would not have been as filled in. The homes were separate. There was space between them. You'd have the Liddell family in one, the Longman family in another, the Cullen family in another. So the people who worked at the hospital were very close. And Eric and his colleagues at the Anglo-Chinese College really had a very short walk from where they were living to the place where they taught. And Eric lived here from about 1925 until probably 1929 or 30 with his parents and his younger brother and his sister Jenny until his parents went back to Scotland.
No, I don't.
I hope you got those heads back.
Yeah, did y'all throw your heads back?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
I didn't know if I had enough energy. Oh, dear.
Good run, ladies. I think Dad would have been proud of that one.
I never grieved for my father when he died, because I was 8 and I hadn't seen him since I was 4. And I remembered him, little baby memories of twinkling eyes and good memories, but it didn't impact on my daily life to find out he was dead. But I grieved for my mother, because she was my hero. And so anything that made her unhappy made me unhappy. So I did grieve for her. And if my father had known that he was going to die young, he could not have picked a better woman than my mother to raise us, because she had such a big heart for children, and she was so capable, and she could earn a living. She was a good business manager, and she gave us unconditional love while managing to be very firm at the same time. So she was hugely important in my life. And I used to say to my friends, well, you know, I didn't really need a dad, because my mom is everything, and I don't really need a dad. And then the movie Chariots of Fire came out, and I thought it was a wonderful movie, and it made my mother very happy, and she relived a lot of good things through that movie. But I felt remote from it. It didn't really involve me. And then when I was, well, in 1991, I got a letter from a lady who had been a nursery school teacher at Knox United Church in Toronto. And in 1940, when we were in Toronto on furlough, Mom and Dad put us in that nursery school, Trish and I. And my mother took us there every morning, and Daddy picked us up at night. And she wrote this letter about how she had never seen Eric Liddell run, but she would never forget his springy step coming down the street to pick up Patricia and I from school, and how he would stop at this big tree, and we would see him coming and rush toward him, and just before we get there, he'd go back on one heel and then come and scoop us up and throw us in the air. And she said I could see what a loving bond there was with his children. And that's when I grieved for my father and realized what a huge sacrifice he was from our lives, and how much immeasurably better and wonderful it would have been to have him with us. But over the years, I've got many letters from people, some who were in the camp, and some children of people who were in the camp. And they explained how important it was to them that my dad was there for them. And they were without their parents, and they so badly needed people like my father, who were loving and kind and could take care of them and educate them during those bad years. And that makes me realize there was a purpose in it all. And today, being here, I'm hoping for a lot of healing, and I'm sure there will be.
Get back to Beta. It's so good to see it again. It's just wonderful. I can feel and a sense when my mother was a young girl frolicking on these beaches and climbing the rocks and having picnics, and my father would be 10 years earlier doing the same thing. And then when my mother was 15, 16, and my father was 10 years older, and he had taken such a fancy to this wonderful, vibrant person, how he courted her by taking her to picnics with the rest of her brothers and sisters, and just a wonderful rest for them, away from the stresses and heat and hardships of their work.
My mother used to talk a lot about the magic circle of family, where the bonds were so strong and so deep that no separation and no absence could break them. But when my father died so suddenly and so unexpectedly, there was a great gaping hole torn in our lives. And we struggled very, very hard to fill that gap. We all longed so much to reconnect the magic circle, and many things happened over the years where we thought, we've done it, and the hole is healed. And then something would happen and we would feel the pain again, and we knew we hadn't quite achieved the job. So we didn't know what to do. But God, in His infinite love and wisdom, did know what we needed. And God provided so abundantly for David McCaslin and his marvelous crew to come to China, bring us to China, surrounded by love, held in God's hand every day, while we reenacted and retraced our parents' steps in a way that was so real and so much the way it really happened that they just sprung to life in our hearts once again, never to be forgotten. My parents experienced so much joy and happiness in China, and my father poured all of this love into China. And as we were retracing our parents' steps, that love just came pouring back to us day after day, more than we could even absorb from the Chinese people. They were so excited, and the love was just flowing, and it went directly into our hearts until we said, they're full, very full. And I personally feel like saying, hey Mom, hey Dad, no more hole. It really did the job. When people watch this video, I hope that what they see is that in the midst of war and terrible suffering and loss, that God always has a greater plan. And if they love God with all their heart and mind and soul, the way my parents did, and the way they taught us to do, that there will, in God's own time, as my mother used to say, Maureen, in God's time, which is very different than ours, in God's own time, there will be healing and redemption and the reconnection of the magic circle. Gratitude is a very silent and extremely powerful force that is greater than any darkness. My sisters and I are going back to Canada with so much gratitude in our hearts that I'm very excited to see what's going to happen next for all of us. And I can only say, thank you, God, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, God.
In the Japanese internment camp at Weishen, every Sunday afternoon, the Salvation Army band played hymns outside the hospital. On February the 18th, 1945, they received a request from Eric to play "Be Still, My Soul."